Good evening, good evening, good evening. This is Legendary ONYX. No, I'm not Phobos. Phobos is not with us tonight, but we're going to have a wonderful show. For today's show, we are discussing queer, kink, and spirituality. Alongside, I have two special guests and two special people to me, Mufasa and Darren. Introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Mufasa. I am the visionary and founder of the Men of Onyx, and I am glad to be here. I'm also an ordained minister, an ordained pastor, and a change management consultant.
That's what's up. Hey, everybody. My name is Darren Calhoun, pronouns he, him, and I do several things. I'm a part of Link Up Chicago, which is an effort here in Chicago to address the rising use of meth amongst Black, gay, and bisexual men. Part of my role with Link Up Chicago is being a spiritual resource and connecting spiritual resources for our population. Then I'm also, as Mufasa said, I'm also an ordained minister. I serve currently as digital pastor at Urban Village Church, where I enjoy being in a fully affirming and fully open space to be sex positive, to be Christian, to be my whole self. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Thank you kindly. And I will also answer the question. I have been in the church world since I came out the womb. Legit, my parents met in church. They did like Samuel, and they said, "Oh, you ain't gonna have no choice. You're gonna be a church baby." But what I've learned through my journey in kink is the love for all, how things come together like a good old peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Oh, yes. We love a PB&J.
So just some questions I want to ask. First question is, have you had a moment where you had to fight with your kink self and your spiritual self? Mufasa?
No, I've never had that moment. Actually, I am a church baby as well, born and bred in the Church of God in Christ, serving now with Gather and as the director of community outreach and community engagement, which is part of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries and the United Church of Christ. But I've never had that that fight back and forth. It as I grew into kink, my spirituality actually grew. As I grew into knowing more about myself and having others around me to talk about that in trust. You have to trust people with certain information. You can't trust everybody. I learned that over the years. But I am consider myself a meta-Pentecostal through and through. So I still speak in tongues and still I'm filled with the Holy Spirit and Holy Ghost, as people call it, and do my work within the community, within both communities, the leather and kink community, as well as the church community, as a fully out and accepted same-gender loving man. And I don't believe that the two are divergent, but they do converge in the sense of the taking people on a spiritual journey or yourself going on a spiritual journey, whether it be in the spirit or in kink.
Mr. Darren?
As always, I have a story to tell. So once upon a time, right, story time. Once upon a time, I was leaving church and I was on my way out of church. My church at that time met in downtown Chicago. And it was a wonderful day. The sun was out and I saw some dude walking by that looked like he was right out of a G.I. Joe comic book. And I was like, what's going on? And so I saw him, and then I saw some more dudes and these big buff dudes, and then a dude in chaps, and I was like, this is Michigan Avenue. This is not normal. And they're all heading the same direction. And so my curious self was like, well, I might as well go see where they're going. And I followed them into what I now understand to be IML. and it was the year, I think it was at the Palmer House. And so like the
International Mr. Leather.
Right. Yeah, the International Mr. Leather competition, this huge competition of leather men from all over coming together. And like that afternoon, it was like, if y'all ever saw, I don't know which version of the Matrix it was, but there was a scene in the Matrix where it was like this dance party / orgy where like everybody's just having a good old time. And I remember walking into the lobby of the Palmer House, and it's got that grand old regal.
Yes, I love it.
That lobby, and it was just like, first the smell hit me. It's like leather and must and all kinds of stuff. But then it was like this party of guys, and it was like I had just never seen anything like that. And I'm literally coming from church, walking into this situation. And at the time, I was not at an affirming church. I was at a church that wanted me to be celibate and wanted me to like not explore this part of my life. But what was really interesting to me, and I'll probably get into this later, is that I was immediately welcomed in that space. And it was like churches try to make this kind of welcome a thing. They'd like have to force it. But here I was just walking in. Nobody knew me off the street, but I was very welcomed, to put it lightly. I was very welcomed that day. And I wasn't even dressed. I wasn't even like in leather or anything like that.
You went naked.
I was not naked. But yeah, I was just there, and I walked in, and because the question was about tension, there was a tension in the communities that I was in where they were like, well, if you there, that's not where God is. And I was like, but I am very much feeling love in this place, and it would be quite a journey to reconcile the two.
For me, that's a whole loaded statement. Just partly because I grew up apostolic Pentecostal. I had no choice but to go to church. My dad has been pastoring for 34 years. Outside of my 9 to 5, the church folks is the reason why I kept gas in my car on a good day, and because I got a check. Mm-hmm. When you go to bigger churches and big organizations, they give you a check for what you do. And so that is partly why when I first stepped into the kink and leather community, if you saw me with a mask on my face. And so what I've realized, and maybe it's also the mental health in me, that I had to learn how to separate, as they say, church and state. Partly because I like my coins, mm-hmm. and I like getting paid, but also because of the fact that not everybody will understand your own personal journey.
Yeah.
And that journey has been an amazing walk. When I first went to IML and was, I think, at the Hyatt, and it felt like the episode of The Wizard of Oz when they went through the poppy seeds.
Ooh, right. Not the poppy seed.
And I saw a gentleman underneath someone else's kilt praying. That's what we'll call it.
Praying. Yeah.
Down on his knees.
Down on his knees.
In worship.
In deep worship.
Deep worship.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, they do this? And then it was also the part that Darren said about how people were loving and affirming when the church world doesn't always teach you that. But juxtapose, I also have the other idea that how can you teach me something when you barely love yourself?
Oh, Lord, you preaching already.
Hey. And the thing is that, let me just jump in there, as well as in the navigation. I founded ONYX because we have a number of people who are involved in church because of the cultural standpoint of church in the Black community and the Latino community. And for other people to be able to talk and see their their walk in other people and talk about the things that are, that we have in common. And so there are a number, even in my Leather family, there are a number of ministers and people who are ordained and those types of people, because we connect culturally. It's who we are. And this is an extension. Our Kink and Leather is an extension of who we are.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like Phobos got something to say, so we're gonna call up my brother Phobos and see what he got to say.
Now, let's take a short break and get into something very important. Getting tested is so important. Whether you play a little or you play a lot, you should never play with your health, especially when there are so many resources like those provided by Project Vita and those free at-home testing kits. Getting tested is as easy as 1, 2, 3. With at-home testing brought to you in collaboration with Sinai Chicago, all you have to do is scan the QR code or go to the URL on your screen and sign up to receive your free HIV testing kit directly to your house. Once you take the test, call the number provided to tell them the results, and this fun little toy box will be on its way to you. Just that easy. Brought to you by the Test, Play, Repeat campaign here at Project Vita. One more time. Test, Play, Repeat. Now let's get back to the show.
Hey, thanks, Phobos, for that. I'm sorry, I had to adjust my little purse.
Yes. Come on. Your left scarf, because you had to be modest. The Saints.
The knees are out.
Because I know the Saints is going to be watching this one.
And I'm prepared.
Right. Prepared.
But it made me think about something about how in the religious sector, it's about guilt, it's about shame, especially when it comes to LBGTQ++, or as they say on the Taka Tick, the Rainbow Mafia, how in the religious sector we're taught about how there's a level of shame in what we do, especially when not everyone is a part of the affirming church.
But there's a level of shame in just talking about sex, period, in the church, especially in the Black church. And we don't talk about it. And so where kink and fetish community allow you and invite that part of you to talk about that, people are yearning for that. And I think that's why ONYX is still around. That's why the community is still around, because people are freeing themselves of that guilt and shame. When I went to seminary, we in African American pastoral psychology, we talked about the fact that we're often told that we are filthy rags from the Bible.
Talk about it.
And if God made us in God's image, how then are we filthy? If God is not filthy. And so it helped to free that thinking. I think I was there before that. My husband said I lived a fantasy life in that I never allowed things to weigh me down. Yeah. There were things coming from the pulpit that I just did not believe. You don't have to believe everything that comes from the pulpit. And so...
you just messed up some people right there.
And I trusted the Spirit in me, my spirit that led me on a journey, that I knew that I was not doing anything wrong. I was expressing myself. I was living in the Spirit and still God's child. And that is where a lot of people, try to make the separation that you are, people cuss and people drink and those types of things in Pentecostal households or Pentecostal churches are sins. Right. In other households or other churches, they're not sin. So what is, we get to the whole thing about sin, but what is sin? But, we have to walk that walk for ourselves.
Yeah.
And in this case, this journey has been a part of me.
Yeah. And, even to expand it, it's not just in the church, because we're culturally Christian, right? We have, even if you don't believe, you still know to call and response, rhythms and so forth.
Yes.
And so I find for so many people that whether or not you're in church, whether or not you believe certain things about church, we inherit this shame around our bodies. especially for people who were socialized as female, they immediately, as soon as they are 10 years old, as soon as their chest start to form, as soon as they start to get some shape to their hips, they call fast. They call, you got to cover up, you got to do all this, because we put onto them this idea that grown men sexualizing their bodies is somehow their fault. Or, for the guys, like, you're both supposed to be like good and holy and not sleeping with the girls, but also if you're not sleeping with the girls, then you sus. And but if you do get caught with a guy, as long as you don't acknowledge it, as long as it's just a struggle or a failure, again, to be real transparent, I was so deep in that space of, as long as I'm resisting the temptation, that I'm not having sex. And it wasn't until I had actually gotten an STI and had to go to the doctor and get treatment, I went, wait a minute, but I'm not having, oh wait, struggling is still having sex, right? It's still part of the ways we have just separated our whole activities, or we start slicing it up. It's like, oh, I'm not having sex if it's oral. Oh, I'm not having sex if it's anal. I'm not having sex if fill in the blank. All is ways for us to avoid the shame that has been heaped upon us.
Well, since you talked about the Black church,
Since we talked about it,
it also makes me think about, if we're going to go back to, the times where how some of the cultural things are catching up with us. So like the whole, let me put my finger up.
oh, you gonna talk about that church finger?
We put up the church finger, but we don't talk about the fact that the reason why we put up the church finger is so that somebody who is a little bit lighter than me can see us going to the bathroom.
AKA the slave watchers.
We don't talk about the fact that a lot of the preachers couldn't read, and the ones who, and this is just my own thought, the reason why a lot of the people in the Black church call themselves doctor, because back in the day, they were the only ones who were educated enough to read and told their own interpretation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, if we're going to call a spade, the problem is a lot of times the Black church is just black late.
You said black late.
Black late.
Oh,
they're late in the way that they do things. They're late in the way that they maneuver. And how you gonna talk about a God who loves when you barely love yourself?
If you're trying to normalize yourself or normalize a people, and the Black church, akins themselves to the children of Jerusalem and coming out of captivity and trying to make a people, you're going to talk differently about and down about anything that doesn't propagate people, and children and those types of things, or for just pleasure. We're not supposed to
demonize pleasure.
We've demonized pleasure. And so, and is sex for only propagation? No. Sex is for pleasure with humans. And so we haven't stepped into that in the Black church at all. Don't discuss it. But it happens. And when it happens, the girl is brought before the congregation,
right, but not the guy.
But not the boys. And so where is the justice in that?
And there's even the piece of how we demonize pleasure, but we love suffering. We love suffering, and we've made it redemptive. We made it pious. We made it good. But suffering isn't what we were designed for. We're supposed to have the good things, but that was, that we could get into a way too deep Bible study about where suffering comes from or why it happens to good people. But this idea that we have become infatuated with the idea of suffering, and yet we mad at folks for being kinky for getting whipped or getting flogged.
Consensually. Yes.
Of course, respectfully.
Because as we like to say, consent is sexy.
Uh-huh.
So now we we're going to talk about this question. We got a beautiful, wonderful, amazing audience. What is something that you enjoy in your kink life that you have had to struggle with on your religious or spiritual side?
So I'll jump in there. Again, it was so interesting going back through my stories for this. I remember I was at a Starbucks with my worship pastor, and I had just come back from a trip to New York, and it was my first time. It was my first time being in a space where I could tip a go-go dancer. And I'm telling my worship pastor about this because I did not have any shame about it, and I didn't want there to be any questions or anything. And so talking about it. And as we were talking, we were getting into all kinds of things about like why people might be doing that kind of work, what it might mean for people to go-go dance, what it might mean to tip somebody, what it might mean to have autonomy and agency to make choices about that. And I remember getting so deep into it, we had like settled on what does love do in this situation. And I was like, you know, in so many ways, love is going to show up for the person and support them no matter what their choices are. You don't even have to agree with everything somebody chooses to be able to show up and to support them. And I remember the conversation got so deep that a complete stranger who was sitting in earshot came up, pulled up a chair, and was sitting down because he was like, oh, we about to get into this conversation. But it was one of those times where I remember in the past, me talking about tipping a go-go dancer would have gotten me sat down for ministry. And I was actively working through the shame and the kinds of expectations where it was like, no, if I'm honest about something, if this isn't something that's out of control, if it's not something that's hurting someone, if this isn't something that is causing anyone harm, then we need a different rubric of whether or not we, quote unquote, should do it. And so I remember making that the beginning of many conversations with many church leaders of like, hey, here's something that's true in my life. I'm not hiding it. It's not a problem for me, but I want to be authentic in community. I want to show up in the same way that I can show up to a kink party and have my whole self out. I want to show up in church and have my whole self out, not necessarily literally physically being naked, but being who I am and not making it some kind of watered down version of me to be pleasing to the saints who just don't really want to know what really happens.
Well, thank you kindly. You know, with those preachers, you're going to have to pull their coattail, how folks say. But we have a wonderful audience. We want to see if they got something to say.
Yeah, so we got a couple different answers over here. And this is Antonio, Link Up Audience Facilitator. So I want to hear what y'all got to say about this. So someone just put anal, which I think that's something that people struggle with a lot, just anal sex in general, with religion. And then someone said struggling with wanting to be a slut, but not wanting to go to hell. So that's a good one. Judgment.
I think the judgment piece is if you believe that you are demonized and that hell exists for you in such a way. And so fear has been a big issue and a big way that the church has controlled people for centuries. And within our community, without even seeing hell, except that we probably go through hell here on earth in different ways. That's a whole nother topic.
That's a good one, though.
But we have to release ourselves from demonizing ourselves in understanding sexuality and understanding the science of sexuality and understanding the feel of sexuality, which the church does not embrace. They don't embrace the science side of humanity. I mean, we've just gotten to having nurses that really nurse in churches.
Not just the lady in white.
Not just the lady in white, but nurses that we have health ministries because the science of health in our churches is necessary. And so with that, I have learned to not fault myself for those types of things. If hell is hell, I won't see it. in this lifetime in that way. It's something as an afterthought. So it's fear of the unknown that has that has really put people in a bind, and we have to free ourselves from that. And luckily, after learning a few lessons of who not to tell certain things and understanding that I am free and I am sane and I am a child of God, and if I need therapy, I'll go to therapy. If I need help, I will get that for myself on my journey, but not to demonize myself by this thought of going to hell in the afterlife when I don't even know what that is.
Exactly.
Well, Antonio, one thing, it made me think of a book, because I love to read, and there's an audible version of it, the book Ethical Slut.
Yes.
Ain't nothing wrong if you ain't ethical about it. It is also what it makes me think about is what is the person needs to also understand what is their definition of being a slut. In your slutness, are you taking care of yourself? Are you getting tested? Are you working on getting a toy box?
That part.
With these nice little pretty toys?
Hello.
Are you connecting to yourself to the right people? Are you only around people who force shame on you versus forcing love on you? What does your journey look like in life?
That's what's up. I really want to hear more about that anal one, but we'll see if the person feels like sharing. You have another one, Antonio?
Yeah, so we got another one. How would you include your partner in your spiritual journey?
That's a good one. Yeah, I can talk about that from a couple different perspectives. My primary partner currently is actually somebody who doesn't consider himself to be a part of the institutional church at this point. He has a spirituality, and he has things that he believes about the divine or the transcendent or the universe. But yeah, he's not looking to be anybody's first gentleman. Sure. And for us, well, for me, firstly, it is to realize that for me, having somebody who's necessarily trying to be by my side at church isn't necessarily a big deal to me. I do a lot of work in church. I do a lot of work in Christian communities. And I've certainly seen the underbelly of the beast, if you will, when it comes to how difficult that can be, especially for the families and spouses and children of folks who are leading in church. And so for me, the desire to keep that separate and the desire to stay out of that, totally understood. But I think for others, that might be something that's really a stronger part of their desire, a stronger part of what they want to see. And so I think that having an open conversation, being able to articulate what's important to you without it being a judgment call on the other person is probably the most important thing. Like, it might be really important for you to be hand in hand with somebody in church, and the other person just might not like that. And that can be part of the conversation that you have as you discover, are you a good match, or how do you connect with this other person? But I think to me, the best thing to do is to be secure in yourself and to be open with the conversation and find out, because, there's, as they say, there's a lot of fish in the sea.
Yeah, there are many ways to be spiritual. I know that we've been connected to the church, to traditional Christian church, but there are many ways to be spiritual in African spirituality, in Buddhism, in other aspects of spirit. I received Tao from one of my partner's temples, Buddhist temples. I was open to that. It only enhances my spirituality. It does not detect away from it. Whereas many people in church are said that's demonizing or demonistic, or there's only one
spirits,
right? And actually, both of my partners there are Buddhists, or part Buddhist, and now the other is an Episcopal priest. And I'm recently widowed, and my partner, who was a recovering Catholic, because I was open to serving the community, the LGBTQ community, or anyone in spirituality, in the spirituality that I do, he supported my spirituality. He didn't go to church with me all the time. I mean, we did belong to a congregation, and he came to that. But when I had to go to funerals, or I had to go to weddings, or I had to go do things in spirit community that was for me, that is my call, he didn't need to be there. He didn't feel he needed to be there. He supported my spirituality and loved me for me. And so that is important, that you don't have to be, some people talk about being unequally yoked. I hate that, because the thing is, if you support the individual in love, what they do in their spirituality, I also belong to Adodi, which is an African spirituality men's group that talks about that and not Christianity. And so there are many ways to the divine, many ways in spirituality, and we actually, one of those ways is through BDSM and fetish,
which we're going to get into too.
Yes.
That was cute. I love y'all.
I thought so.
Nice and deep answer. My answer's a little bit different. My answer is, so I'm not always a receiver. I'm a giver. If you know, you know. And with that being said, you treat those situations like you would something that is long and thick. You don't take it real fast. You take it slow. So it's about introducing those that you love and those that you care about to those sides of you. Like Mufasa said, I am multifaceted. I am more than kink. I am more than church. I am more than spirituality. I'm also one who studied theater, studied literature. I work in a nonprofit, worked with youth since I was 18. I do a whole lot of shit. Mm-hmm. But anyone who is coming into my world, I don't say, okay, baby, this is all you need to be a part of. Mm-mm. I also grew up in a household where I had no choice but to follow what my parents did. But baby, I'm 41. So
testify.
At 10 and 11, because I lived in Greg and Ruby house, I did what they wanted. At 41, I'm learning to understand me, and any partner that is in my world has to understand that. Well, I'm looking at the time, and we
do have an online question.
Oh, come on with the question.
Come on, online.
What are your spiritual hard limits?
Ooh. Spiritual hard limits. That's deep.
That is hush over the crowd.
That's spiritual hard limits. I have no spiritual hard limits, because everything is God and everything is of God, and there are different paths to God. So I've read the Bhagavad Gita, I've read the Quran, I've read the Bible, I've read writings by prophets, even the prophet Martin Luther King Jr. and the prophet, Sadie Hawkins and the prophet, those are all prophets to me that speak to my spirituality in different ways, as well as The Ethical Slut is a prophetic book in and of itself, and other books in the fetish community. So I don't see any hard limits on, I choose to worship in a certain way, but I don't see any hard limits on things that influence and grow my spirituality.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about something we talked about earlier, which is fear, and how many of us were taught that fear is going to keep us safe. And so we tend to amp up fears about other spiritual practices. We amp up fears about the ways that other people believe, about other ideologies. And so when I think about it, I think about how we just, like, I was a part of a Pentecostal church. Everything was a spirit. It was just, ooh, that's the spirit of such and such. Ooh, you don't want that spirit to hop on you. And the intention was to keep us safe, but the reality was it made us afraid of everything. Oh, if the something fell off the wall, you know, that's a spirit. You got to pray it out. You got to sling oil all over your house. You have to watch who's coming into your house and watch who's in your car, and you were just afraid of everything.
You just need a hammer and a nail to put it back up.
Sometimes you just need to fix something.
Right.
But when I think about hard limits, I think about it from this lens of fear. And it's just like, God, you know, God has not given us a spirit of fear. Like Paul was able to say, I can become all things to, you know, all kinds of people that I'm win some. And a lot of times in the fear mindset, we're like, oh, I can't go there. I can't do that. I can't be around that kind of thing. You know, if that's your conscience, if that's your conviction, then that is what it is. But I invite people to challenge the fears that they have. You know, like when people, you know, to the earlier question about what if you become a slut? What if you just get out of control? What is the worst thing that could happen, right? Let's sit with that. Is it that you're worried about your sexual health? Because we can talk about how to reduce risk. We don't have to be afraid to keep ourselves from getting an STI. We can just use science, and we can use the resources we have. We can use medication, and we can use harm reduction. Are you afraid of, quote unquote, a spirit jumping on you? Because if you're in a Christian tradition, the tradition says that you serve the Almighty God. Like, who can snatch you out of God's hand? You know, again, if that's your tradition, if that's the belief that you're coming from. So my invitation is to, like, think about where does love lead, and where is fear trying to be the boss? Because it don't have to go down like that.
I mean, I think some people are fearful that they'll be taken over and that they'll love things too much, and that they'll be, you know, that they'll go down the rabbit hole. But then again, we need to understand our limits, and we need to understand that there are limits to everything, and how we take it and how we deal with it.
That was wonderful answers. But I know me.
Go on and be you.
I know me. And
let the glory be revealed.
I do have some hard limits. One of my hard limits is if that's what you do, that's between you and whatever you worship. But one of my hard limits is Satan worship, satanic. But part of the reason it's one of my hard limits is just because of my own, not my own background and the way that I've been taught, but that's partly because certain things get to my spirit and get in my dreams, and baby, I don't need that. I already got too many voices and too many things living up inside of these locks.
Come on, voices.
But just to be honest, that is one of my huge hard limit, that if that's what you do, look, I got some associates, because I don't use the F word often, but I have some associates that I know who do that. And look, we could go get some food. I ain't gonna get a drink with you because I really don't drink. That's when you see other people. But when I act the fool, but we'd go get something to eat. I'll even pay, especially if it's a payday. But it's one of my hard limits. Are there any more questions from the audience?
It looks like
I think that was it for the audience. Yes.
You know, on the limits thing, it did make me think about, you know, how sometimes they got that porn that will be like the confessional porn or the Mormon boys porn. I'd be like, this is a little creepy for me.
but the thing is you know what it is. You don't have to. I guess to me, a limit is you know what it is. You found out what it is, and you know what it is, and then you choose not to invite that into your spirit. You choose to not invite that or entertain that. But you don't go away in ignorance, not knowing what it is.
Right. That part.
That part,
Yeah.
you need to know what it is that you're putting on the back burner.
Right.
So, like, I don't particularly care for horror movies. I saw The
Same
First
here.
Exorcist, and I saw Silence of the Lambs, and I'm like, that's it.
Right.
So I don't do
Yeah,
that.
no.
But I know what it is, and I
Right.
know what it is that I'm stepping back. So I don't consider that, I don't know if I consider that a spiritual limit. I just consider that good sense for me,
Right.
knowing who I am.
Yeah.
Sound like a kid from the 80s while we don't do My Buddy.
Oh,
Not Chucky.
yeah.
But I think right now we have a message from Mount Sinai. Hey, Mount Sinai, tell us.
Hey, Michelle, what are you doing tonight?
Hey Eric, Project BDAC is doing the Toy With Me party on Zoom.
Nice. What's that all about?
They focused on this and sex positive topics, and they're going to be offering free home HIV testing kits through Sinai Infectious Disease Center.
HIV home test kids. How does that work?
So they're going to share a link in the chat where you can sign up to get your home test kit.
Okay, I've been wanting to get tested, but I didn't really want to leave the house.
I feel you. You just give them your contact info, and someone from Sinai will contact you to send out your free home HIV testing kits. They'll put it in an unmarked box to your mailbox.
Okay, then I do the test by myself? This sounds kind of difficult.
It's not that hard. Once you get the test kit, it's pretty easy. Just follow the step-by-step directions, and you'll get your results in about 20 minutes. Let Sinai know that you took the test and what your results were, and you can even call them and they'll walk you through it. Sinai will then contact Project Vita to let them know that you took the test, and they'll send you out a complimentary gift bag.
Can they also help me access PrEP and any other sexual health needs?
Yeah, of course. Sinai partner up with Project Vita to provide sexual health education, prevention tools, and medical treatment to the community. And they have lots of services too.
Sounds awesome. I definitely want to go and get tested at home, and I'll do the Toy With Me party too.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mount Sinai. Now it's time for Just a Tip. But you can go a little deeper. Well, that's what Antonio said. Let's talk about some rarely discussed things in church. When we think about sexuality and the path to spiritual growth, Kink invites vulnerability, trust, and self-exploration without shame, spiritual practices that seek connection to self, others, and the divine. For instance, in both the kink and Christian communities, that's a lot of C and K words, in BDSM, it talks about surrendering. Surrendering control involves trust and freedom. Well, if we think about just spirituality itself, it's about trusting the divine and finding peace in vulnerability. That's deep. In African spirituality, the body is sacred and pleasure is seen as divine, allowing empowerment through the celebration of desires. I'd agree.
Amen.
So, if you ever felt torn between your spirituality and your sexuality, don't do it. Don't do it. You can embrace both of your journeys. We ain't one person. We're multifaceted, baby.
All right now. I surrender all.
Don't play.
I surrender all.
All to thee, my love. Let me stop before we get.
But I think, before we
Say there. Go ahead.
But I think, yeah, definitely. I teach a class, BDSM and spirituality, at a number of leather conferences across the United States. And a lot of people come because they've had issues with this. And so I invite anyone who does have issues, who wants to talk about this subject, you can contact me, at my contact information. And I'll gladly talk to you because that's part of my ministry. My bishop knows. I was not ordained until I was found a place where I could be ordained as my authentic self. And they know that I'm in the community. They know those types of things, and it's understood, and I am understood as a whole being. So I think that vulnerability, in fetish and kink, you're trusting someone to take you on a journey. Consent is key. You've talked about what's going to happen in your playtime beforehand. Nothing is just off the cuff. Many people think that somebody's just going to grab you by the hair and sling you to the ground and do lascivious things to you. Only if you ask.
Only if you ask.
Only if you ask.
Enthusiastic consent.
Enthusiastic consent. Only if you ask and it's already been consented to will that happen. So there's nothing to be afraid of. If you don't want it to happen, it won't happen. And there are ways to stop it from continuing with safe words.
Because if somebody's doing it and you haven't talked about it, that's actually an unsafe person.
Correct.
You don't want to play with somebody who doesn't want to talk about your limits, doesn't want to talk about what things they're into and not into. That's a red flag, and that does not mean it's a carnival. Do not get on that ride.
Because you will be flung off silly.
Right, and you'll be hurt, and then you'll be like, well, I let that man. No, he had red flags, and you ignored him.
Right. And so, yes, trust is key. Vulnerability is consensual, and the person is taking you on a journey, and the person is also bringing you back from that journey safely.
Oh yes,
That's a big one.
that's what he said.
Now, before I move on real quick, it also made me think about the question earlier when it talked about being close and working with your partner through your spiritual journey. It's the same thing. It's about, hey, let's talk. Let's figure out consent-wise what we will do, what we will not do. We have a brother where one of them goes to church all day on Sunday, and the other one, funerals, weddings.
Christmas and Easter.
I said what I said.
Oh, just funerals.
But that's just not, that's just like many heterosexual couples.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
My grandfather didn't go to church, and my grandmother was in church all day.
But it's
yes.
It's more of, when I'm talking about, was the consent piece, that if we as a couple decide, okay, baby, we're not going to church, then look, I'm going, you can stay at home. And that's how my grandparents, until my grandfather decided to come to church, that's how their relationship was. But it's really about let's figuring out what's best for us versus what's best for everyone.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Well, thank y'all. As they say, it's time for announcements. Got to do the church announcements.
Come on, church.
Come on, church announcements.
We are connecting on the third Sunday of every month. Toy with me. Our stream will have our guest to be Hello, which is a partnering with Project Vita, and our wonderful host, Phobos, will thankfully be back. I love me some him. We will have more seats, a live audience, and you get testing, so you get one of these beautiful boxes. Ain't it pretty?
It is.
It is.
We got a few more announcements. I believe it's coming quickly.
Project Vita would like to remind you that we have a variety of care programs and support groups available. From Caminando Juntos, an all-Spanish-speaking HIV support group, T for T, a trans empowerment group by trans folk for trans folk, Affirming, Loving, Learning Youth, or Ally, our youth LGBTQ+ support group, and Empowerment Echo, our domestic violence support group for lesbian and bisexual women. To learn more about the programs you see on your screen, email care@projectvita.org or visit projectvita.org/care. The Mind, Body, and Soul Health and Wellness Circle offers a wide range of programming available to Black, gay, bisexual, and same gender-loving men in Chicago. These offerings include, but are not limited to, free classes, online resources, and community building activities. To learn more about upcoming events, classes, and to sign up, please visit shywellnesscircle.com or sign up through projectvita.org/MBS-sign up.
Oh, thank you, Carino. Ain't he pretty? Just wondering, in our wonderful audience or any of you beautiful people at home, did you put any questions in the chat? We love a good question.
Yeah, Legendary, we got some questions over here. So one of the audience had asked about resources in the Chicagoland area. So do you know any affirming churches or religious sects or anything that y'all could refer to folks in the Chicagoland area?
Great question.
Yep, absolutely. One of the quickest ways to find some of the churches that are affirming and welcoming is you could visit Pride in the Pews. It is a website led by Don Abrams and a few others where they're finding, in particular, Black affirming spaces and welcoming spaces. You're more than welcome to drop by my church, Urban Village Church. That's urbanvillagechurch.org. And then you have other spaces as well.
Yes, Gather. We're now a virtual ministry of arts and spirituality. And so you can go to Gather Oak Park, AustinOakPark.org. For us in Gather, you can also find the Metropolitan Community Church on the north side, a church for me. I believe they're now worshiping back at the Center on Halstead. They are there, but Pride in the Pews. You can also look at the United Church of Christ, open and affirming.org, a website for affirming churches in the area as well. So there are a number of spaces, and feel free to contact myself or Darren if you have any more questions on that.
And if churches are not for you right now, maybe you just want to find community. Maybe you just want to find some more people to talk to or do a Bible study or something like that. Q Christian Fellowship is qchristian.org is a resource where there are all kinds of community groups happening online. And we also have an annual retreat, annual conference that'll be coming up in January in Atlanta. So feel free to look up qchristianfellowship.org and check that out. But there's a lot out there. And I think one of the things for us to remember is that we're not alone. You know, a lot of times we get trained to think that we're the only ones, or we're the only ones with questions, or no one can deal with whatever our kink is. And the reality is the church is full of freaks. I'm just going to say it. It just is what it is. And if we would be more honest, we would actually have better fellowship. So come on and find out.
Yes, the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries as well, led by Bishop Yvette Flunder.
Absolutely.
You can find us online as well, and we have conferences, and Gather has an Oasis Bible study series going on. So you can find Gather, a new kind of fellowship, on Facebook, and I just did a study on New Thought Theology of the last 2 weeks, and we're continuing that. So there are many, many resources.
These are some church announcements for real.
And that's Q as in queer. Are there any more questions?
I think that's it.
All right. It's been a fun night.
Great. Wonderful. And the church says,
Amen. So we're going to wrap it up, and it's almost time for the benediction. We just want to leave you with a couple of things. In case you're looking for what we do, just remember you can follow us at Project Vita Inc. and ONYX Midwest on Twitter or X. We're also on Instagram. And look for our stories and our posts from our upcoming show topics. And you can also call in for questions. We will answer the questions you send at the end of every show every month. After each show, audience members will have an opportunity to test right here at Project Vita. You can come in, fill out a form. Once you've been tested by a certified tester, you can figure out what you want to be tested for. They do HIV, syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia. And one of our prevention staff, they so beautiful, will reach out with the results. I got 4 boxes, so you already know I've been tested.
Right. You can get a test every
And I always tell people, look, if you know one STI that you might have, and you don't know if you have others because you've been playing, and you ain't always, whether you've been safe or not, you don't know what your partner been doing, you can always come in at Project Vita, hit the QR code to do it.
Yep, you can walk right in.
But you can walk right in, walk on in, set up an appointment. You can even scan the old QR code and get you a test, a toy box. They'll send you the test. Once they send you the test, you'll send the results, and they'll send you a beautiful toy box.
Absolutely.
Like the one pretty back behind me. It has all the good stuff.
And it looks like we have time for one more question.
Yes, we have an online question asking, is Link Up Chicago still ongoing?
Yes, that's a great question. So I'm a part of Link Up Chicago, and we have existed in a number of ways, but Link Up Chicago is absolutely still going. And if you have questions about that, you can certainly visit Link Up Shy. That's LINK UPCHI. linkupshy.info for more information, or you can visit our Facebook page or our Instagram, where you can reach out to us, send us a DM. I'm one of 3 people who typically are responding to the messages. So by all means, you can talk to us there. And yes, it's still going. We still have great things planned. We got like movie nights coming up. We've got a few events happening at different places on the south side, west side, and the north side. I want you to be there. So hit us up on Facebook is probably the best place to do it, but hit us up. And yeah, there's some fun stuff that we have coming.
Darren, what is Link Up Chicago for folks that don't know?
Sure. So Link Up Chicago is this effort to talk about the methamphetamine or meth or crystal or tea. Sometimes if you ever see in a certain social app, you might see people talking about party and play, and they have a capital T in that party. Yeah, P and P or those kind of things. And so what's happening is Black men in Chicago are using meth. And a lot of times, because we're so like casual with it, we have all our nicknames for it. We don't realize what it is. But like I said, Crystal, Tina, anything like that. And we are all love, no judgment place. So if that's something that you're actively doing and you're aware of it and you know how to keep yourself safe, we want to walk alongside you. If it's something that you're not aware of, I like to share with people one of these really important tips. Sometimes people who aren't being very healthy and safe will put meth inside of the lube that they use. And so I've had multiple people who have experienced meth because it was in lube that they weren't aware of. So one of the tips is, if you're going out to play, just bring your own lube with you, whether it's silicone or water-based or whatever, coconut oil if you want to, just bring your own. And then that's one of the ways that you can reduce your risk for harm in that case. The other thing that we do is tell people, if you are going to use, and this is something that you're consenting to, test your substance. We have free testing kits where you can test your substance for things like fentanyl, which can it's so much in the Chicago drug supply that many people who are just trying to use Tina will end up with fentanyl in their system, and it is so much more powerful that right now Black men are leading the numbers in Chicago for overdose deaths. And so it's like, our brothers don't have to die. We know we can show up for each other. There's no shame. Give us a call. Our phone number is 8. Let me see if I can do this right. 844-942-LINK. And you can, again, reach out to us, give us a call. If you're trying to figure out your housing, if you're trying to figure out your medical care, if you're just trying to have somebody to talk to, we're there for you. So thank you for asking about Link Up Chicago.
Well, as we look at the time, I come from
Time draws near.
Listen, I come from a church where we're We hold strong, but we don't hold long.
Oh.
And we went over our time.
Ushers hold the doors. We need to have a
However,
good
it's time for
dismissal.
benediction. We just want to say thank you kindly to Mr. Calhoun and to the wonderful, one of our wonderful founders, Mufasa Ali. And I am the Legendary ONYX. Have a wonderful time, and we'll see you next month. Peace.
Bye.
My name is Jerome Montgomery, and I have the honor of serving as the Executive Director of Project Vita. Toy With Me is our monthly live and live streaming event where we discuss and explore ways of creating a spicier, safer sexual experience through education on the use of adult toys, as well as an exploration of kink and fetish. Here at Toy With Me, we promote sex positivity and embrace all gender-loving communities. Toy With Me events are sponsored and produced by Project Vita, a nonprofit organization located on the southwest side of Chicago, where we provide a host of low-cost or free services to the community, including behavioral health services, case management services, food pantry services, acupuncture and massage, as well as rental and utility assistance. Once again, we would like to show you how grateful we are by joining us tonight. We encourage you or welcome you to just sit back and enjoy, or join us in the conversation by dropping your questions or comments into the chat. Join me in welcoming the gentleman of ONYX Midwest.
Thanks, Jerome. I'm Cariño Blaze ONYX of ONYX Midwest. ONYX was founded in 1995 to bridge men of color to the leather community through education and fraternization. With 10 chapters nationwide, the Midwest chapter serves Chicago, St. Louis, Milwaukee, Des Moines, and other cities in the Midwest. You can visit onyxmidwest.com to learn more. We're proud to partner with Project Vita for Toy With Me, bringing Kink 101 topics to our community, and we hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks!